On behalf of Pittsburgh State University Library Services, I welcome you. I am Ruth Monnier, she, hers, Learning Outreach Librarian. Thank you for joining us this morning for our panel on the importance of sharing experiences. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick announcements so that we may all enjoy the program. We are recording the program. We will hopefully have it available later for everyone to watch. We ask that you remain on mute when you are not talking. Please be considerate and kind to others when using the chat. If you have a question or need technical assistance, please use the chat feature. We will be asking for questions for our panelists, so feel free to put those in the chat. 2020 Banned Books Week's theme is Censorship is a Dead End, Find Your Freedom to Read. From The Hate U Give to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, both books and others that address police brutality and racism continue to be challenged. But censorship goes beyond books. Some people have even requested that Black Lives Matter displays in libraries be dismantled. Our panel today will be talking about the importance of sharing one's experiences with others, whether it's through books, displays, presentations, or other forms of communication. So without further ado, we welcome our panelists who will introduce themselves and share some opening thoughts on the importance of sharing their experiences. We are going to start with Deatrea. Each panelist will have approximately 5 minutes.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to those who will be watching this recording a little bit later. As Ruth said, my name is Deatrea Rose. I'm Director of Student Diversity Programs here at Pittsburgh State University. And I am appreciative to be one of the panelists talking about issues around censorship, around banned books this morning. I had to really go back and reflect because it had been a while since I had read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, all the way back to my high school days. And so I had to do a little refresher on that book. But I did go back and look at that. And of course, The Hate U Give is a little bit more of a current book that's out there and has also been turned into a movie, as well as The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. But I want to talk a little bit about why it's important to talk about those experiences and own those experiences, because I think in order for all of us to be well-rounded individuals, that life is not one-sided. There are so many different facets to this thing that we call life. And so being able to learn and understand what others have experienced, what they have gone through, whether it is in written text or whether it's in conversations, is very valuable to not only us as educators, but also to the general public. I always tell people this: you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times the reason we don't know those things is because we haven't taken the opportunity to educate ourselves or to surround ourselves around people who may have a different perspective than the perspective that you have. And so I look forward to this conversation today as we dive into a little bit about the two books that Ruth has brought to our attention today. There are hundreds of banned books on the list that we could probably dive into as well, but today we're going to focus on these two. And so with that, I will yield my time over to Shauna and let her give a little bit of expression, and I'm sure I'll be back on later to talk a little bit more in depth.
Thank you, Deatrea, for that. And I love your quote about you don't know what you don't know, because that is actually something that we use over here at the Bicknell Center quite frequently is, well, I didn't know that I didn't know. You know, because with everything going on, not just for the tech side of stuff here, but there was a lot of things that I, you know, realized I didn't know that that was a thing. And, you know, that has become more applicable. Again, I am Shauna Witherspoon, and I am the Client Services and Gallery Coordinator over here at the Bicknell Family Center for the Arts. My job is very different than what most people would assume. Our building runs with a little different model than most performing arts centers, but you know, that actually works for my benefit. I get to not only do booking and scheduling and billing and things here at the Bicknell Center, but I also get to help with programming and event coordination. I also do all of the gallery work here. So any shows that go up, I help pick those and get them ready for display. When they're done, I get to take them down. And as an art major, that, you know, really kind of helps feed that art side of my soul, you know, and I'm so thankful to have that opportunity. I am also glad that it puts me in a position that I would not have expected to help with things that are happening now. I love that we're having this meeting, and thank you, Ruth, for setting up this Zoom. I think that discussing banned books and censorship is something that should happen more often. And I think that these conversations are so important. Me personally, and as I'm sure we'll get into later, I don't believe in censorship. I feel that it is important to share these experiences, and that as humans, we tend to feel alone in a lot of cases. And especially like during this pandemic, there's this huge thing about isolation and quarantine. And unfortunately, I think that even before this, there are so many people that feel isolated or feel like they are not a part, or that their experience is not normal. And unfortunately, their experiences happen to more than what they know. And I think that it is very important to be able to share those, because then we don't feel alone. We realize that this isn't just happening to you, it's happening to people everywhere. And in order to fix some of these more negative experiences, we've got to realize that you're not the only one, that it happens. And I think that it happens across the board to lots of people in lots of situations. And I think that discussing that, acknowledging those, and working together to fix them is the only way that things are going to get better. And so I will go ahead and pass it on to the next and look forward to the rest of this conversation.
All right, Khadija, I think you're up.
Hi, my name is Khadija Ceesay. I am a student at Pitt, and I am also the secretary for BSA. I remember a couple years ago in high school, we were talking about banned books, and I was talking about how are people supposed to learn about new things and understand how they feel about certain things if they're not giving access to that. And so I feel very passionate about banned books, whether I like them or not. I think that one way or another, students and children are going to grow up and they're going to find those books, whether we like it or not. And they're going to understand those experiences and relate to those certain people. And I think having a hold on someone's education is not good at all. We want to learn what we want to learn. And so when I read Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in high school, I didn't like the book at all. But it taught me a lot about the time period and their mindset and why they said the things that they said. And also just, it gives you a lot of perspective, and it teaches you a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise know if you didn't have that book. And I think just like those displays for the Black Lives Matter and information on police brutality is very important, especially in a time like this, because how are we supposed to know what people are going through if they don't, tell us, or they don't share their experiences? And some people write it out, some people, sing about it, and there's different ways to bring awareness to those issues. And I think it's very important that we have these conversations about banned books, because I love books, I love reading, and I'll always try a book whether I think I don't like it or not, because I like hearing those perspectives and having people tell me their stories, because I'm very invested in a lot of the, not only just like the drama of some certain books, but also like the storylines and where they go. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
Thank you for introducing yourselves and your perspectives about why it's important to share experiences. We're going to start with our first question, and reminder to the audience, feel free to put anything in the chat anytime for questions. There have been many calls for more diverse books throughout the last 10 years, and particularly in the last 6 months for all age levels, whether it be a toddler or a senior citizen. Can you recall the first time you read a book and identified with the main character and thought maybe that person looks like me or feels like me? Can you tell us more about that experiences? Let's start with Khadija.
I read, I can't remember the book off the top of my head, but it was about a little African-American girl, and she did not feel like she belonged in the body that she had. I went through a phase of where I was surrounded by people that didn't look like me, and I felt like I had no place. I did not belong, but I also felt like if I looked more like them, then I would feel better about myself. So I went through a phase of where I just didn't like the way that I looked. I tried to straighten my hair. I tried to do different things. And eventually when my hair just got damaged and, I had to reassess who I was and what I was putting myself in, I understood how important it was to actually love yourself. And when I read that book, she went through this phase where she was like, oh, I get it now. This is who I am. There are things that you can change about yourself, but there are things that you have to keep that make you who you are. And that really resonated with me. And I'm so sorry that I can't think of the name, but it was a really good book. And I feel very passionately about the way that she was a young girl, and it went through her whole life. And she was just like, I don't like the way that I am, and I wish I could change it. But eventually she just became very happy with herself. And it's a process that I really understood because I went through that. And so I just love that, but I can't figure what the name is. So
That's really powerful, Khadija. Wow, just so powerful. Do you remember approximately what age you were reading the book, or grade level?
I think it was in middle school, because that's when my whole thought process was kind of going on, and when I was like, I don't like this, so yeah.
I'm glad that book, it feels like you have since come and figured out some things, and I'm glad to help you with your journey. I'm going to see if we can do a little digging, maybe come up with a title here in a moment. But thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Khadija, before we go to our next panelist?
Oh, no.
Thank you. Deatrea?
Well, for me, I had to go back and look, because as a parent of 3 daughters, reading is something that we do in our house quite a bit. And so I went back, I had to pull back up my daughter's reading list, because we read a lot of books. My youngest daughter is 13. And so over the summer, we did a lot of reading. One of our favorite books, it's called Genesis Begins Again. It's a book written by Barbara, Alicia Williams, sorry. And it's a book about a young African-American girl who, it's kind of familiar to Khadija's story of a little bit of self-actualization, realizing who she is as a person. She had to overcome some obstacles of a parent who kind of made some bad choices along the way, and she dealt with that trauma. But there are certainly a lot of different books out there that I've enjoyed reading with my daughter, that I've enjoyed watching them read growing up. I've always tried to make sure that in terms of the literature that we put in front of them, that they're able to see characters that look like them, because I think it's important for them to be able to see people who they emulate. along the way, and that they can strive to be. My daughter really enjoys reading all the stories like about Rosa Parks. She loves reading about the girls that went to Central High School and had to face all the different obstacles of people not wanting them to be in those schools. You know, the community that we live in, Southeast Kansas, there aren't a lot of African American or brown skinned people, Latino, Hispanic, Asian American, Pacific Islander, what have you, that maybe have an opportunity to be a part of different types of socioeconomic groups. And so reading is something that evens the playing field for everyone, because having access to a library, having access to books, whether they are, you know, in print or if they are on your phone or on a tablet or whatever, it really evens the playing field. One of the things that I've always said to my kids is readers are leaders. And if you can read, nobody can take that from you. You being literate means so much in the United States of America. Being able to understand and process and comprehend what's in front of you. And so my husband and I have always been very much about making sure our kids have books, that they have access to books, and that they understand that there are great people in this world who look exactly like them, who have done amazing things. And we don't just celebrate those people in February, we celebrate them every single day.
Thank you, Deatrea. You mentioned purposely seeking out books that look like your daughters to put in front of them. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges? Like, how much time and energy do you think that you spent doing that, maybe compared to any, like, just in general?
Well, the awesome thing is that I have amazing friends who are educators of color. And one of the projects that maybe some of you heard about, my really good friend, Kayla Horn, who lives in Joplin, Missouri, did an awesome book collection this summer for making sure that every library in Joplin, Webb City, Carthage, I even think Carl Junction, would have diverse books in their elementary school, because we know that the foundation of a good reader starts, I mean, let's face it, 4 years old, 5 years old, they should be reading and learning to read. So she made it her purpose to make sure that there were multicultural books in all of those libraries, and they were all donated. She created a page, and people just from all over the country started donating books, and she was able to fill all those libraries. Well, that program took off where now some of our friends like in DC and Chicago and Michigan, Colorado, even Miami, Oklahoma, they adopted the program as well. And a lot of people, like, you know how you can do a birthday fundraiser for like cancer or whatever. All of the birthday fundraisers have been around putting multicultural books in the hands of predominantly white students, because they need to see that while they assume that they are the majority, if you really look at the United States of America, the Caucasian race is not the majority race in America. And so our students need to grow up understanding that there are other people out here that may not look like them, sound like them, or act like them, that are also really great people. We know that racism and discrimination, someone teaches that to our children, because in kindergarten and first grade, everybody loves everybody. They play together, they hug each other, they want to be each other's best friends. But then something happens around that middle school age where they start recognizing differences. Parents start talking about differences. And so, you know, I think it's important that, yes, we are different, but there are a lot of things where we share and are similar as well. I could share one story with you about my oldest daughter. When she was in middle school, she was invited to, and I've told this story many times before, she was invited to a birthday party of a pretty affluent family in the community that we live in. Well, the family was having a sleepover birthday party, but because my daughter was African American, she was not allowed to spend the night, because the girl told her, my parents don't allow Black people to spend the night at our house. Now, of course, my daughter is devastated by this and wanted to go to the birthday party. And of course, coming home, telling myself and my husband the story, we were also devastated, but a little outraged, to be 100% honest with you. And so I actually reached out to the mother because, like I said, they were a affluent family. The husband was on the school board of our school district. And I thought, wow, is that what you think about the people who you are supposed to be helping to govern in our community? So I reached out to the mother and said, I want to let you know that I'm very disappointed that the invitation for the sleepover was not extended to my daughter because of the color of her skin. Of course, the mother was super embarrassed because I'm sure that was a conversation they had at home where that daughter wasn't supposed to repeat it. But we all know that what you say in front of kids, they're going to embarrass us and say it anyway, right? Those of us who are parents know that. And so I said, you know what? It's no problem at all if that's how you feel. No, that's not what we said. What we said is she could only have 5 girls. We just couldn't have everybody spend the night. No, that's not really what you said, but that's what you're going to say today to save face. Well, consequently, we decided as a family that it would be in our best interest for our daughter not to even attend the birthday party. And so what we did as a family is we went to Tulsa for a fun day, and we took our kids to Incredible Pizza and just made it a fun day for the Rose family. And that was it. Like, you're not going to the birthday party, period. If you're not welcome at their house to spend the night, you're not welcome at their house, period. And so that happened to her in the 6th grade. And she has carried that with her all these years. She still talks about that story. And in fact, this summer, when everything took place with the Black Lives Matter movement, now that she's an adult, several of her old classmates reached out to her and wanted to apologize for their behavior all through middle school and high school. So we have to speak up. We can't allow those types of things to, oh, well, they didn't really mean that. Like the mom said, oh, no, it was just a number. We could only have 5 kids. No, that's not true. You got busted, and you didn't want to own up to your discrimination against my daughter, who is an innocent child in all of this. And so that is why I think it's important that we make sure we put literature in front of our kids, that they know that my Black skin is beautiful, whether you accept it or not, and I can occupy any space that someone else has the opportunity to occupy.
Thank you for sharing, Deatrea. I feel there's so much truth in what you're saying and letting us know about. I think the link for Kayla's project is Get Diverse Lit, and I'm gonna add that to the chat for anybody who wants it. Shauna, do you wanna go ahead and tell us a little bit about your experiences?
Yes. First of all, Deatrea, eventually or later today, whatever, I would love to have that list of books that you have for your daughters to read.
I'll email it to you.
Yeah, I would love that. For me personally, I don't know that I really ever had an issue identifying with a main character as a middle class, being raised by middle class parents, white female in Southeast Kansas. That was not a struggle for me. And to be honest, it was never even brought up as an issue. Being raised here, I was taught that the color of your skin didn't matter and that we were all equal and, all of that. And so it never occurred to me that would be an issue until I had my daughter and trying to find things for her, whether that was books or movies or things. It wasn't until I was older that I started to realize how difficult that was. I remember she was about 3. We were planning her birthday party, and we're walking through the stores and we're looking at all the birthday decorations, and she's 10 now, and so back when she was 3, that was right about the time that like The Princess and the Frog had just come out. And as we're walking through the aisles, and she like immediately goes straight to those pictures and those plates and those things, and she made the comment that this princess was brown like her. And that was a really tough moment for me because I don't know that I had ever actually, it had never fully sank in for me that it wasn't until that point that she had not really identified with, you know, any of the princesses or the books or the things that, you know, she saw or watched or read, you know, the stories that we read to her. Like I read the same, you know, bedtime stories that I went to my grandma's house and got my bedtime story books, you know, and it wasn't until she, you know, made that comment at, you know, 3 years old of, you know, she's brown like me, did it actually sink in, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that, you know, by reading her these stories, she couldn't identify, you know, all of these main characters are white and nobody was brown like her. And that was a really hard thing for me to accept as well. Just for the simple fact that I felt bad as her mother because I hadn't done a better job prior to that. And I mean, like, I realized that, you know, it's not my fault, whatever, but I think that there could have been things, if I had had more diverse books in my hands as a child, then I don't think I wouldn't have to make it a conscious effort. I wouldn't have to make a conscious effort to make sure that my daughter can identify with those. Now, since then, you know, obviously we've worked very hard to make sure that, you know, she has books and movies and things, and I seek those things out for her. I am a little frustrated sometimes with the effort that it takes to find those items. I also, you know, am more aware now of what she brings home, the books that she checks out from the library at the school. You know, I've worked some to do, you know, they're required to do these AR things, and, you know, read AR books and take AR tests and stuff at school. And, you know, so I've done some research on, you know, getting the lists of what those books are, to make sure that if the library doesn't have diverse books, which they really don't, I think that, you know, I try to find those for her and have those. I don't feel that I should have to be honest. I feel like this is more of a systematic thing. I think that we should be doing better. Myself included, like we should be doing better to make sure that parents don't have to do this. That, you know, Deatrea shouldn't have to find books and keep lists. I shouldn't have to get a list from her. When Khadija grows up and has kids, she shouldn't have to seek out these books. They should be available for our children. And I'm glad that we're taking steps to make that change. But it doesn't change the fact that it hurts my heart that this is where we're at in today's day and age as well. She did a project last year in 4th grade, and their project was to research. They had a list of famous people, and they were to research this person. They wrote a research paper on this person. They then wrote like a speech, kind of like made it from their research, like if they, like an autobiography type of thing, this little speech, and they dressed up in, you know, costumes. We made costumes for them to dress up, and they had like a program at the elementary, and you walked around, and they called it a living wax museum. And so like you walk around and you would push this, or, you know, step on this little paper button, and then they would recite this, you know, little speech that they had. And I remember her coming home last year, and she was excited about it, but she was almost a little disheartened, and I couldn't figure out why. And so we finally sat down and talked about it. And she said that she was upset because the person that she wanted was picked by another person. And she said, I really only had 2 options. And I said, well, what do you mean you only had 2 options? And she said, well, there's only 2 brown people And if I'm going to have to dress up and I'm supposed to look like them, I only had 2 people to choose from. And that was so hard to explain to her. You know, and you feel bad because that's how she's feeling at the time. Now she ended up doing Harriet Tubman was the person that she chose. And after we did the project, she was glad that she had chose her. And she did a fabulous job. But it also kind of brought to light the fact that I think we also don't do a good enough job highlighting the positive contributions of the African-American community. And I think that, you know, when they had a list of 20 or 30 that she could choose from, and she felt like only 2 of that 30 she could identify with, was upsetting to me. Now, like I said, at the end of the project, she was really glad, you know, that she had picked Harriet Tubman, and she, you know, did a wonderful job with her project. But I think there again, that goes to show, like, it was difficult when I started doing some research and trying to find, you know, for this project, she had to have so many sources. There had to be so many online sources, so many text sources, and different things. And some of that was hard to find information on. And different information that she could use. And I think that as a whole, and as members of the educational community and things, I think there again, it highlights an area that we could be doing better. Not only do we need to be providing books for leisure, you know, reading for our children, and for everyone to have more exposure, but I think that we need to be highlighting, you know, those positive things that members of the African-American community have done over the years. And, you know, I'm sure there are a lot more than what were on that list. You know, like, obviously I found a bunch of others that could have been included in that list. And I think that we're not doing a good enough job highlighting that. And, you know, I had to spend extra time going through that and explaining that to her, and doing lots of extra research to prove to her that there are lots of other options out there. They just weren't included in her list. And that's one of those things that it breaks my heart that she came home, and that, you know, yes, it educated her more for me to spend those extra hours getting her that extra information and going through all of that with her. But that's also something that nobody else in her class did. No one else in her class researched any of those other people that we chose. No one else in her class spent extra time learning about the positive contributions that all of these other individuals had done. And I think that 1, they should have, and 2, she shouldn't have to spend her free time doing that. You know, you want your kids to be out and be active and riding their bike and jumping on the trampoline, and, you know, and like, yes, she should be educated on it, but, you know, this was something that we spent extra time doing outside of school, that I feel should have been more included in the class project. She should have had more options. Those things should be talked about. She shouldn't have to take her free time outside of, you know, school to be learning that, because otherwise she wouldn't have learned it. And I think that is definitely something that has weighed heavily on my husband and I both over the last year or so. I know that, you know, like for Khadija, she was about middle school when she found, you know, that book, and when that was really something that was hitting her personally. And just like a lot of other things, I think that that's happening earlier for kids today. We're seeing it sooner. And that's, I really noticed about 3rd, 4th grade. For my children, that's really when they've noticed differences between them and their friends, and have had some struggles with that, and realizing, hey, well, with this project, and then they come home and they ask those questions. Well, why were there only 2?
True.
and I don't have answers for that. You know, I mean, how do you respond? I don't have answers. And so I do my best to provide that extra information for them. But I think that if we would focus on getting more education out there, more diverse education, more diverse books, that would be something that would have helped in this instance to eliminate or alleviate her from feeling different than every other member in her classroom, because that's what it is, or that's what it was for her last year. You know, she's like, I'm the only brown kid in my class.
Right. And I think that's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we live in Southeast Kansas.
Right. Yeah. But
that makes it all the more important that everyone's aware of the diversity that is in the world, that maybe we don't see when we just look out our door, and what accomplishments have come from the community that have maybe been forgotten. I mean, I'm a big fan of traffic lights, and I know that's Garrett Morgan, who was an African-American male, but how many other people are those things that we just take for granted, like at one time people knew and then it's gone. We do have another question from our participants. So I'm going to summarize or paraphrase this one. They're afraid that the issues of books or things being in written literature will become soon not an issue because people will not be reading or partaking in books. I'm going to do my little library thing and mention that banned books celebrates censorship in all forms, including programs, movies, and other options. But they are concerned about that, and younger individuals are using social media as their sole source of information in video gaming, so they're not doing any other literature reading. What are your thoughts on ways that we can draw young people to the pleasure of reading and a source of quality perspectives for complete information? So what do you think on that? Let's go ahead and start with Shauna.
I think that the censorship would be an issue regardless. I think yes, we're addressing the censorship of banned books right now, but like you had said, it's for all sources. And so I think that it is a topic that is worth discussion. And I think if people continue to ban books and things, that will soon follow into other sources of social media or things. I think we're already kind of seeing some of that censorship as well. And I don't feel like that sort of thing should be censored. I don't believe in any sort of censorship. I think that everyone should have the right to find whatever information they want, regardless of what opposing opinions or whatever it is. I think that everyone has the right to access that information. So that's just kind of my take on that. I do think that we should be encouraging reading, but as far as like specific things on how to get them to read, as opposed to doing it on or finding, social media, video games and things, I don't really know. I don't necessarily have a way other than just, pushing it as parents to our children and showing how important that is.
Khadija, thanks, Shauna. Khadija, what are your thoughts?
I think we should use social media to the best of our ability, since that's what everybody is using right now. You could always make events so that people are more interested, give them a prize or have them discuss, because I know reading alone, yes, I read the book regardless, but also having people that are there to discuss with me also makes the experience a lot better, because they pull in perspectives and things that I would have otherwise read over. So I think just getting more, if they see other people reading certain books and, they like it, they will feel more inclined to read. But I know that in this time, it's very hard to find actual time to sit down and read a book. I mean, I've been trying, but stuff piles up, and I always kind of beat myself up for not reading books because I have so many that I've just not read. And so I think if we just use social media and if they see their friends reading certain books, because kids, like, they love to read. Like, my sister loves to read, but at some point they just let go of it. So, and my mom always encourages my sister to read all the time. She takes a book for her everywhere, like at the park. Sometimes when she sits down to like eat a snack, she'll read some of her book. So, we just have to try to use social media and try to push people to see that reading is not so hard, because people think that but you can always find time to do something if you really enjoy it. So.
Thanks, Khadija, for your thoughts. Deatrea, do you want to add anything?
Sure, I'll add a couple things. I looked at the question. I think Dr. Irwin sent the question in, and I would contend that he is 100% correct that our kids are obsessed with social media. They're obsessed with gaming. And I think one of the things that would help with that in terms of getting kids to read books is we have to look back to our school system, our K through 12, and we as adults have to be involved in the K through 12 system. One of the things in our community that we have we've got a lot of phenomenal librarians, but one that I would shout out is Karen Barwick, because she's amazing. She fell into our laps from the East Coast and wanted to live in small town America. But she created a group called Girls Read and Boys Read. And what that group is, it gives them an opportunity to come to the library after school or in the evening, and they can sit on bean bags, they can bring a blanket, and they encourage the parents to come with them. They can sit under a tree and they can read a book. Because I think long are the days when we were in school. I'm going to date myself back to when we used to read a book and Pizza Hut did the Book It program. Does anybody remember Book It? Am I like old? So, and if you read a book and you did the little book report and you turned it in and then you got a free personal pan pizza, how exciting was that? So we had competitions about who can read the most books. And so I think those days are gone, because my daughter that's 13, she's only required in 7th grade to do 2 book reports a year. And I said, that's not enough. They should be doing book reports every month so they can read different books. And so I think we have to be a part of that. There are so many different councils you can be on, PTL, you can be on your school site council and let them know how important books are. Whenever, it used to be a time when parent-teacher conferences came, that's when the bookmobile came. I'm really dating myself now. And I always would set aside about 40 or 50 bucks. I know it's a lot, and because my kids loved books, and so they wanted to go to the bookmobile and they wanted to buy all these books. And I think there's something phenomenal about holding that book in your hand and the creases and reading those pages and the characters come to life more than you can get on reading it on a screen. And so I think to Steve's point, yes, video games are taking over in social media, but I think we have to let them know, once again, readers are leaders, and what you read is just as important. I told my Guerrilla Gateway class this the other day, because this week we were on career services and we were talking about all services that they offer, like the etiquette dinner. And I talked about interviewing skills. And I told them, if you are knowledgeable and you are well-versed on several different topics, you can blow through an interview very easily, because you have prepared yourself by knowing current events, by knowing some different facts about different authors, about what's happening. And so it's important to keep that book in your hand. I think also when you think about college students and reading, one of the biggest issues that we see with a lot of our students is, let's face it, they can't even afford the textbooks, okay? That's why the library has been so good about reaching out to our gen ed faculty about making sure those gen ed copies are on reserve in our library, because we have students who can't afford the books. And so if you can't even afford to put a book in your hand, then of course you're not going to read it. And so that goes back to accessibility for our students, but also making sure they understand that, hey, put that cell phone down. Let's take a reprieve from it. Whenever we go on long car trips, our daughter's recently taken a job that's 5 hours away. And when my 13-year-old travels with us, she has to read for at least an hour and a half of that trip. And so no phone, read your book. And she does that. So I think we have to model that behavior. We have to show how important it is to have a book in your hand, because those are lifelong skills. Those are skills that are going to go with us. And as Khadija said, yeah, as a college student, you're in a time crunch, but I think once you graduate and get out, you're going to find that you want to read, you want to sit down and just enjoy a really good book. Especially with COVID-19, we need something to like Calgon, take me away. Once again, I'm dating myself, but put a good book in your hand and let the cares of this world just evaporate away from us and get involved in that book.
I want to point out a lot of people, Deatrea, do not think you are old because we all also remember Book It.
Okay, good.
And a lot of people are applauding also the fact that we should read on the go and build enjoyment of reading. Our next question, published in 2017, The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, is about a teenage girl who grapples with racism, police brutality, and activism after witnessing her Black friend be murdered by the police. This book has been challenged in the past for being anti-cop. How does this compare to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, published in 1884, that talks about the N-word and usage of that, as well as comparing that to Kill a Mockingbird, which Khadija mentioned is one of her favorite, and looking at that court case. So how do you feel the racism depicted in those three books, or compare two of those, matters, and why does it matter that it's depicted how it's depicted in those? I do want to point out, of those three books, Angie Thomas is the only African American woman. The others are by white individuals. And let's start with Khadija.
When I read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, everybody else in my class was white. And when they read it, they were like, "Oh, it's not that bad," you know. It's like I feel like they understood it to a certain extent. But I did not like the way that I think his name is Tom or Tim, the Black man that followed Huckleberry Finn around. I didn't like the way that he was depicted, because people, like, it was just, oh, he's not very smart, he's just following this little white boy around, and I didn't like it, but I knew that I had to read it because it dealt with a lot of issues that I would otherwise not have known at the time. And even though it's very, like, there are some parts of it where it's kind of like, it's hard to read, it's very necessary. And in The Hate U Give, I feel like people can say like it's anti-cop or whatever, but the system that is built, the system that they come from, has a lot of issues with like prejudice and racism, and they don't know, the de-escalation, like when they're in a situation that they don't otherwise know, how to de-escalate that, and how to a lot of people have mental illness, and so they're not acting like in a negative way. They're just, it's their mental illness that's coming up, and sometimes they're not trained for that. And so I remember a couple weeks ago, my friend showed me these Facebook posts from when she's from McDonald County, and a bunch of these students had to read a book, and it's called like I Am Black or something, and it's detailing a comedian's issues with racism, and they had to read a little passage from that, and it was about his name. And a bunch of the parents were like, "Oh, you're insinuating that my child is racist. That's why do they need to learn this?" And no one's insinuating anything. No one's saying that, you're racist or your child, It's just that who else is going to make you read these things? Who else is going to make you look at these things and understand them for what they are? And that's why I feel like we need to have not just more diverse people in like education, but just diverse people everywhere. Like if you don't bring those people that you're talking about specifically into those conversations, how will you accurately know what you're talking about? You have to get those people in the room and, you know, ask them about their experiences. So these books, when I was the only Black person in the room, I was like, my perception of these books is going to be so different from everybody else's. I love To Kill a Mockingbird because I like the way that I can't remember his name, the lawyer man. I like the way that he dealt with the case, and I like the way that he, you know, he wasn't biased, and he, you know, he lived in this time where everybody just was so prejudiced and so like awful, but he did not bring that to him in the courtroom. He actually like tried to get justice for this Black man. He wasn't like, you know, everybody else, but also there were hints of like where he came from and their ideals. So these books are very necessary for people to read. And I think that, yeah, there are different themes like, you know, racism, anti-cop, whatever, but those conversations need to be had and those books need to be read. So.
Thanks for your powerful insights, Khadija. Deatrea, do you have anything that you would like to add?
You know, like I said at the very beginning, man, it's been a long time since I read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. But, you know, one thing my mother always taught me is this: if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. And so these books are necessary for everyone to read. And while it may be painful as a young person to read the N-word, we have to know that that is the history that we evolved from. And I think the saddest part about comparing The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn to even the book The Hate You Give is look at the time that is spanned between those two books being written and look at where we are today. I think if you look at The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, there were people that were offended by the book. Even white people were offended by the book. But if you dig deep into literature, they weren't offended by the book for the same reason that people of color were offended. They were offended by the book because they didn't like the use of the broken English dialect, which is sometimes seen as people from the South who speak sometimes broken. My husband's from the South. When I first met him, the first few months, I was like, I don't know what you're saying. I don't understand. I had to really, you know how you listen to people with a accent or some type of dialect and you've got to lean your ear in like this, like, I got to hear every single thing. That's how I was with my husband when I first met him. And now, you know, I've conformed him to the Midwest after 25 years, but it's a running joke in our family. But I think they were upset because of the use of broken English and not necessarily because of the racial slur around the slave, Jim, being that word being called to him. But I think banning the book, it takes away a piece of our history that I think is important for people to read and to understand. And I also think that Tom and Jim were good friends. You know, even though sometimes Tom kind of talked down to him, I think Tom didn't know any better because once again, kids emulate what they have seen and what they have heard. And even though he wanted to help him get to freedom, there were some times along the way in that story that you would take pause and be like, wait, what did he just say? But understand that that was how he grew up and that's what he knew. But even in all of that, I still believe he had an allegiance to Jim all the way through that story, trying to help him get to freedom. Then when you compare that to the book, The Hate You Give, I think that sometimes we're looking for the happy ending. And we didn't get that in The Hate You Give. We got the real, live, unadulterated, this is what happens. We just saw it with Breonna Taylor, right? The grand jury goes behind closed door, closed proceedings, and all three officers are off the hook. One officer is charged with endangering Breonna's neighbors, not even the person that he shot. Sorry, my light keeps going off because I am still. And so I think that when we compare those two pieces of work. There are so many things that we could dig into, and I know I've got to be conscious of our time, but one thing I want to bring up for you is Star, the young girl in that story, comes from a family that is a middle-class family that is trying to do the best they can for her, sent her to private school, and the issues, she was conflicted because here I am, when I am in front of all my white friends, this is how I act, and that is called code switching. There's a perception and there's an expectation that Star would act a certain way in front of all her white friends. And there's a scene where her and her white friend are sitting on the floor, and Star begins to try and open up about how she's feeling, and the girl basically downplays those emotions, and Star gets up and leaves and is like, this, I got to get out of here. But that's where we are today in 2020, is that our students that are on these campuses, our younger students that are in school, there is a expectation that we're not allowed to share our emotions and our feelings. We are expected to just smile and say, good morning, how are you? As if we didn't just watch the news last night and hear the President of the United States tell the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by and act like that doesn't hurt us. And the same way police brutality. The truth hurts, and not all officers are bad and not all people are bad, but when those are the real experiences of our students and our children who are experiencing those, it behooves us not to pay attention to those experiences, because those emotions are very raw and they deserve to be heard. They deserve to be listened to. They deserve to have a place at the table for a meaningful discussion, and not one that is just pushed underneath the rug and, oh, that's not what that person meant. Even going back to my daughter in 6th grade, it's 100% exactly what they meant, that they do not allow people of color to stay at their home.
Thanks, Deatrea. Shauna, we have a little bit of time left, but feel free to go ahead and add.
Thank you. Yeah, me personally, I feel, it's so hard. And I think that all of the books are warranted for their own reason. They all have merit, and there are things that we can learn from them. And, just to echo what Deatrea was talking about, we shouldn't feel like we have to act a certain way, or we can't say certain things, or that we have to smile and pretend like everything's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. And until we start having these hard conversations and acknowledging this problem, like, you should be mad. You should be furious. We should all be furious. And, it's so hard that I feel, or, a lot of times, like, I feel like I can't say that. In a lot of situations, I feel like I have to just sit back and listen, but it's not right. And it's not fair. And we should all be angry. And until we can get that out, and until people feel comfortable that they can say those things, then nothing's ever going to change. I mean, Huckleberry Finn was written back in 1884. And then, this book was written today, The Hate You Give. And like, I can't believe that we're still fighting a lot of these same things. And a lot of, situations are the same. And I think that part of that is because for the longest, whether they were embarrassed or whatever, a lot of white people want to sweep that under the rug. And they want to pretend that these things didn't happen, or downplay what the situation was. And it was horrific. It was horrific and embarrassing that people thought and felt that way. But like you said, it's something that's taught. Racism is taught and passed down from parent to child, and that continues. And until we can have these real conversations, that's never going to change. We have to provide the information and provide the history for those students, because obviously, like, there's a lot of people that are not going to get it from their parents because they didn't get it from their parents. And I feel like we would be doing a disservice to these young people by censoring and hiding what it was. No, we need to have these raw, hard conversations And we need to realize what happened, what is still happening, and have empathy and understanding, because if you don't learn from our history, it's going to continue to repeat itself. And so I think it's time that we stand up and we start learning. We need to start learning from our mistakes. And if that means that we need to make sure that there aren't banned books and that the information is out there in one form or another, these experiences, these voices deserve to be heard by everyone, in my opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you, Shauna, Deatrea, and Khadija. It is now 10 o'clock, so I have a couple closing things, then we can continue. Thank you again for anyone who joined us live or anybody who will watch this in the future. I would like to invite everyone in joining us and thanking our panelists for taking time out of their morning to share with us their experiences and allowing us the opportunity to learn from them and what their life has been like. I'm going to round of applause. You want to do virtual round of applause, but thank you to Deatrea, Shauna, and Khadija for your experiences and your willingness to be with us this morning. If you are looking for more information about banned books, please stop by your local library or their website if they're not open or they're only doing curbside. Please take the opportunity to read banned books. I'm also putting a link in the chat so you can learn more about banned books and how you can keep promoting those in your life. We hope that you celebrate Banned Books Week, even though it's a week all year long, by fighting against censorship, as well as sharing other stories and listening to their stories and experiences through books and other means of communications. Thank you again for joining us, and hopefully we all can read a good book. Thank you.